In the autumn of 1966, 23-year-old Paul Snider and his 18-year-old wife Karen resided in CID City, Illinois. The couple had a 1.5-year-old daughter named Paula. Paul worked as an electrician at the Indiana Harbor Belt Railroad in Hammond, Indiana. On November 12th of that year, he was on his afternoon shift while Karen stayed at home with their infant. His parents, who had been vacationing in Buffalo, New York for the past 2 weeks, returned that evening around 8:30, unpacked their car, and attempted to contact the young family, but there was no response. Concerned, they went over to the house to retrieve their dog, knocking on both front and back doors, but received no answer. The house was dark, save for a bathroom light that remained on, and the television in the living room was still flickering. Unable to get in through the doors, they entered the garage where the dog was chained outside and took the pet home. Later, Paul arrived around 11:10 that night. Using his key, he unlocked the front door and entered his dark house, recalling the TV was still on in the living room. He proceeded to the bathroom, where he noticed the light remained lit and bloodstains marked the floor. Calling out for Karen, he was met with silence. Upstairs, he found the hallway light malfunctioning and the main bedroom dark. Attempting to switch on the bedside lamp, he found no power. His foot unexpectedly touched something on the floor, prompting him to grab a flashlight. Illuminating the room, what he saw resembled a scene from a horror film. His wife lay motionless on the floor, her body riddled with blood. She had been shot in the chest with a shotgun. Blood splattered across the walls and furniture. The room was in disarray. The TV had been knocked over, the vanity had been overturned, and the mirror shattered. The telephone was ripped from the wall and broken. Paul immediately called the police and his parents. His mother arrived first and, upon seeing the scene in the bedroom, refused to let her husband look. Their baby, unharmed, was found safe in a bassinet in the living room. Investigators who examined Karen's body concluded she had died from a shotgun wound to the chest. However, the medical examiner later determined the cause of death was stabbing. She had been attacked with a thin, sharp object resembling an ice pick or screwdriver. She had been stabbed 90 times in the chest, 17 times in the neck, and 19 times on her back, totaling 126 wounds. The murder weapon was never recovered. The victim's gloves had been torn, and her skirt was pulled up, but her underwear remained intact, suggesting that sexual assault was unlikely. Forensic analysis revealed the house showed signs of forced entry. A basement storm window was broken, with a blood-stained glass shard nearby. Yet, the damage to the window was too small for anyone to have climbed through, and the window behind the storm window was intact and securely locked. Police suspected the killer's entry was more likely through another means, as the evidence did not point to an intruder using the broken window. Through the window, police also noted prim marks on the back door. Yet they remained skeptical that this was how the killer entered, since the door was still locked. They believed the murderer likely accessed the house via the front door, especially since blood tracks led there. To them, it appeared the killer had tried to mimic a break-in, perhaps to mislead investigators. It seemed more plausible that Karen had knowingly let the attacker inside, suggesting some degree of familiarity. However, authorities were puzzled as to why anyone would target the young wife and mother. Since Paul, her husband, was confirmed to be at work and had an airtight alibi, and because Karen hadn't been sexually assaulted, The police didn't dismiss the possibility of a sexual motive altogether, but it was not confirmed. A few days after the murder, Karen's funeral took place, with some detectives attending. Among them was a man who drew their attention, a 21-year-old family friend and co-worker of Paul named James Barbier, one of the pallbearers. Police noticed him because of cuts on his hands, which the blood trail and blood on broken glass suggested he had injured himself during the frenzy. When questioned, his wife revealed that when he returned home on the day of the murder, he appeared nervous and had fresh cuts on his hands. Blood was found on his body and clothes, prompting him to immediately wash his clothing. Police arrested Barbier and collected his washed pants, which, despite laundering, still bore bloodstains. Still, the district attorney believed insufficient evidence existed to charge him formally, and Barbier was released. The case soon went cold. Paul and Karen's young daughter, Paula, first learned of her mother's murder when she was 5, hearing classmates discuss it because their parents had mentioned the event. Paul explained to her when she was 11 that her mother had been killed. Although the family was convinced James Barbier was the perpetrator, they lacked concrete proof. Paul's family remained convinced of his guilt for years, but the evidence never materialized to secure a conviction. Decades later, in December of 2022, a man named Paul Seeley, aged 29, contacted the police tip line. He mentioned that his grandmother often recounted the details of Karen Snider's murder. He had heard the story at least 5 times. Curious, he asked for any case updates. This prompted investigators to reopen the cold case, especially after discovering that Karen's dress and James Barbier's pants still existed as evidence. They tracked down Barbier, who was then 78 years old and living in Craig County, Missouri. In March of 2023, police obtained a warrant for his DNA, collecting a sample to compare. In April of 2024, DNA testing revealed that Barbier's blood matched the blood on Karen's dress, and her blood was found on his pants. Subsequently, the 79-year-old James Barbier was arrested at his residence and transported to Illinois. Although he was granted leave to return home after his hearing under the protections of the pretrial fairness law, authorities continued their investigation. In legal proceedings, courts are required to consider defendants' age and health conditions before setting bail. For example, a man named Barbier had suffered a stroke the year prior and was diabetic, so authorities permitted his release on the condition that he remain in Missouri or Illinois. Additionally, he was ordered to surrender his passport and firearms. While Barbier's family was disappointed that he was allowed to go home, they also felt some relief that, after 57 years, an arrest had finally been made in connection with Karen S.N.'s murder. No trial date has yet been set for James Barbier. Moving back to another case from April 1968, Ross Graham, who went by Ross, was a 47-year-old resident of Vero Beach, Florida. A veteran of World War II, Graham had fought in the Battle of the Bulge and received the Purple Heart for his service. Married with 3 children, he worked as a milkman. On April 11th of that year, Ross departed in his truck for his afternoon route, but did not return or report for work. Concerned, his family alerted the police the next day, prompting a search. A small plane was dispatched to scan a wooded area where Ross's milk truck had been spotted. Officers found his body beside the vehicle, shot 3 times, in what appeared to be an execution-style killing with a small-caliber gun. His wallet was empty, suggesting he had been robbed of roughly $70, equivalent to about $630 today, accounting for inflation. Witnesses reported seeing Ross speaking with two black men walking along the road and hearing that he planned to return shortly. Shortly afterward, they saw the two men enter his truck, which then drove away. Another nearby resident recalled hearing gunshots and seeing the two men enter a late 1950s model car, described as a Cadillac. The police believe Ross was forced to drive into the wooded area, robbed, and subsequently executed. Despite investigations, no arrests were made at the time. The tragedy deepened when Ross's wife passed away 3 years later, leaving their 3 teenage children orphaned. Their oldest child, Larry, later revealed that she had died of a broken heart. Over the following 6 years, law enforcement conducted 16 inquiries into the murder, yet the case remained unsolved, eventually becoming a cold case for many decades. In 2006, Ross Graham's family requested the sheriff's department to reopen the investigation, which they agreed to do. In October of that year, a story appeared in the Indian River Press Journal about the resumed case. Interviews with Larry and Karen Graham disclosed that the murder was devastating to their family. Following the article, the police identified 2 persons of interest. Shortly after, the newspaper's editor received an unusual letter from a man named Thomas J. Williams, claiming he had been accused of the crime but insisted he was innocent. The letter was peculiar, since Williams was never previously linked to the case, although he had a criminal record. Investigations into Williams ensued, but no significant progress was made. Williams died in 2016. In February 2022, the sheriff's department was contacted by an inmate claiming to have additional information about the case. Williams's sister confided that Williams himself had admitted to shooting Ross, prompting the police to investigate further. They quickly located Williams's ex-wife, who also revealed that he had confessed this crime to her as well. 2 independent witnesses then came forward, offering remarkably similar accounts of the events. Authorities believed their stories, especially since these witnesses had no connection to each other and had hesitated to speak earlier, fearing Williams's reputation or influence. With Williams now deceased, their testimonies gained credibility, and in April of the year 2024, nearly 56 years after Ross Graham's murder, police officially identified Thomas Williams as the shooter. Nonetheless, the case remained open, as investigators suspected there was a second individual involved in the robbery and murder. While they believed they knew this second person's identity, they had yet to establish a definitive link, and they hoped someone with pertinent information would come forward, enabling them to finally close the investigation. On December 2nd, 1990, a couple searching for cans along a rural road in McDonald County, Missouri, discovered a severely decomposed female body near an abandoned house, roughly 4 miles north of Pineville. The victim had been bound with 6 different types of restraints, including a parachute cord, an item used exclusively by the military, which made the case more perplexing. She had been strangled and overdosed on methamphetamine, and forensic estimates suggested her death had occurred 1 to 2 months prior, placing it around September or October. The woman had no identification, and despite thorough searches of the area, no clues emerged. Her physical description was circulated. She was a white woman, aged between 21 and 31, weighing about 120 pounds, with dark, shoulder-length hair. However, no missing person reports matched her profile, and no one came forward to identify her. One piece of evidence, the military-grade parachute cord, did not lead to her arrest or identification. 19 years later, in 2009, her skeletal remains were sent to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, where facial reconstruction and DNA profiling failed to reveal her identity. A detective described her case as being solvable only by the grace of God, leading to her becoming affectionately nicknamed Grace. In September of 2020, Orem Incorporated, a private DNA laboratory, took a new approach. They re-examined her remains and generated a fresh DNA profile, which, through genetic genealogy, led to a woman named Danielle Pixler, residing in Topeka, Kansas. Pixler was contacted and revealed a complex family history. She had a half-sister she had never known, who had been placed in foster care with her after their mother tried to set the sister on fire when they were only infants. Pixler had been searching for her half-sister since she was 18, but had found no leads over the past 28 years. Upon consenting to a DNA test, her genetic profile matched the unidentified woman's, confirming her identity and bringing long-awaited closure to a haunting mystery. Shab Beth Garber, her missing sister, remained an elusive figure for authorities, largely because no photographs of her as an adult could be located. Born on the 1st of March, 1968, Garber was 22 when her life was tragically cut short. She spent most of her years in Kansas's foster care system. Although she was briefly adopted, she was returned to foster care, remaining within the system until reaching adulthood at 18. Her family included an older brother, Rob Ringwald, who spent decades searching for her. He was deeply shocked to discover her remains had been left untouched in a box for nearly 30 years. Her family eventually arranged for her remains to be buried alongside her great-nephew. Following her death, law enforcement agencies launched an investigation to identify her killer. They traced her journey through the foster care system, noting that she had traveled to Oklahoma seeking family. At the time of her murder, Garber was living in the Pineville area, residing in a halfway house. In August of the current year, police announced they had a leading suspect, Dennis Rader, infamous for his serial killings under the nickname BTK. Rader, at the time, was serving 10 consecutive life sentences for murders committed between 1974 and 1991. His hallmark was binding and torturing his victims, a signature that earned him the moniker BTK, standing for Bind, Torture, Kill. Notably, Garber was murdered a few months before Rader's 10th and final victim. Authorities believe her death was part of his killing spree. Rader's victims were all killed in the Wichita, Kansas area. In contrast, Garber's remains were discovered in a different state, about 225 miles from downtown Wichita. Moreover, Rader did not use drugs during his killings, and he was openly confessing to the 10 murders he had been convicted of. This raised questions about why he rejected involvement in Garber's death, given his confessions. Rader's daughter, Carrie Rosner Cooper, cooperated with investigators, yet they eventually ruled him out as a suspect. Attention then shifted to a longtime suspect, Taylor Reeves of Pineville, who was just 24 at the time of the murder. Reeves had an extensive criminal record, including drug trafficking. In 2004, law enforcement received a letter alleged to reveal the details of Garber's murder. The letter, beginning with "I want to tell you something," accused Reeves of committing the crime. Despite this, Authorities struggled to advance the case, though they remained convinced Reeves was responsible. One detective, Lori Howard, confronted Reeves about the murder, recounting how she had wanted his final call before his death to be a confession. Reeves allegedly stared at her and smiled in response. Tragically, Reeves was himself killed on the 15th of November, 2021, when he was struck by a vehicle while riding a scooter near Jane, Missouri. He was 58 years old, passing away just over 7 months after Garber's identification was made. Reeves had died, and with his passing, more people felt free to discuss the circumstances surrounding his murder. Investigators interviewed 6 individuals who provided information implicating Reeves in the crime. One witness claimed to have observed his actions from start to finish, describing in detail what Reeves did, while another saw the body several days after the killing. Based on these accounts, the detectives reconstructed the events leading to Garber's murder. At the time, Garber was living in a halfway house and working at a chicken processing plant. It appears that on Halloween night, Reeves, driving an old pickup truck he had borrowed, picked her up while she was walking along Missouri 59. He tied her up with material he found in the truck and took her to an abandoned house, where he raped her. Her screams echoed through the valley, raising Reeves's concern that someone might hear her, prompting him to inject her with methamphetamine in an attempt to keep her silent. Sadly, this resulted in her overdosing, and Reeves strangled her afterward. Nearly 34 years later, in March of the year 2024, law enforcement announced they now had enough evidence to confirm Reeves was still alive. They revealed plans to charge him with first-degree murder, emphasizing their certainty. Detective Lori Howard stated, "We are 100% sure we have the right person. What truly breaks my heart is that he's no longer alive. I know he has family and loved ones, but he had to face justice for his actions. Maybe he is paying now, I don't know, but we did our job." Garber's brother, Rob Ringwald, reflected, "I suppose karma caught up with him. I'd rather see him in prison, but you reap what you sow. In the grand scheme of things, it's poetic justice. He ended up dying himself." Thank you for following today's story. For more content, check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed, via the link on the screen or in the description below. That's all for now.